The Fringe Podcast Summer Rewatch, Episode 5.
Hi, my name is Josh Jackson, and you're listening to the Fringe Podcast.
Web hosting for the Fringe Podcast is provided by HostGator. Easy WordPress installation, unlimited domains, unlimited disk space, unlimited bandwidth, and a 99.9% uptime guarantee. On sale now for $6.36 a month. Visit thefringepodcast.com/hosting and start serving up your website from the best hosting company in any universe. Welcome back to the Fringe Podcast Summer Rewatch as we continue our journey through Fringe. We just wrapped up Season 1 last week, and so that means tonight we are kicking off Season 2, watching the first 5 episodes of Season 2. So we're going to be talking about A New Day in the Old Town, The Night of Desirable Objects, Fracture, Momentum Deferred, and Dream Logic. Now, if you've been listening to our podcast for any amount of time, I guess since Season 2 at least, you will have heard us make fun and ridicule A Night of Desirable Objects as being the worst Fringe episode ever. So, will this still be the worst episode ever now that I've seen it again and having gone through 4 seasons of Fringe? I don't know, but we'll talk about that and a whole lot more other topics tonight. I think we've got a great show tonight, and I'm excited to be joined by Michelle. I think, Michelle, this is your 3rd appearance on our Summer Rewatch, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So you're just like an old veteran by now. I mean, not old, but a veteran anyway. And we're joined for the first time for the Summer Rewatch series by Dana. How are you doing, Dana?
I'm very good.
Good. Why don't you, since Michelle has already had a couple of opportunities to tell us about herself, Dana, why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell us about you?
Okay. Well, I'm Dana. I am from the lovely city of Weymouth, Mass., which you can see featured in Season 1, on which we meet Mr. Jones, Dr. Jones. Of course, it's not really Weymouth, but at least it was geographically correct as opposed to some of the episodes we've seen. Those of us from Massachusetts would know what I'm talking about. But I've been watching Fringe since the beginning, and I've been a part of the Fringe community. I've been listening probably for the past 6-7 months. I've been catching up on some of the older podcasts and listening every week ever since. So
yeah, I can tell you're a pretty diehard Fringe fan because you've been making a lot of comments on some of our SoundCloud postings that we're doing, and I've always been. Anytime I read one of your comments, I can tell that you know your stuff probably better than I do. In fact,
well, me and my friend, I have like a few friends that we watch. We watch every week. We watch, and then we'll sit there and we'll just talk about it for a few hours after each episode, and we like analyze. It's like all of our favorite shows. So
that's cool. That's great to have a group of friends that you can do that with, and
yeah.
So we're glad to have you with us tonight. We're glad to have Michelle. Now, typically we would get right into the episode discussions, but there's been a lot of interesting things that have happened this week in the world of Fringe. So we're actually, before we get into that, we're actually going to do a Fringe binge segment.
It's time to get the scoop on Fringe. It's the Fringe binge. The Fringe binge.
All right. So I guess we should just get the bad news over with first. What do you say? The breaking news that shocked the Fringe world this week was that one of the showrunners, executive producers, there's Jeff Pinkner and J.H. Wyman, or Joel Wyman. Jeff Pinkner is leaving the show, and it looks like it's effective immediately. So I'm going to read just the statement that was released by J.J. Abrams. So JJ says, "We're so excited to begin work on the 5th season of Fringe and to be able to deliver the final 13 episodes to our passionate and devoted fans. For 4 years, J.H. Wyman and Jeff Pinkner have worked tirelessly as a team to keep all of the worlds in order on Fringe. We're thankful for the invaluable contributions Jeff has made to the show and, of course, wish him well and look forward to working together in the future. J.H. Wyman's importance to Fringe cannot be overstated, however, and I'm thrilled that he will continue as showrunner for the concluding chapters of our story. We can't wait for our fans to see what we have in store for them in the wild conclusion of Fringe." So Pinkner has decided to step down. It was his own decision, and it was made because he would like to pursue other projects. It is said that the split is amicable on both parties. There were no, ill feelings or anything like that here. So that makes J.H. Wyman the sole showrunner for this 13-episode final season. So let me ask you guys, Dana and Michelle, what do you think about this?
Well,
Go ahead.
well, my first thoughts were, they know that the show is coming to a conclusion, and maybe something really exciting came across his desk, and he's like, Fringe, we know, has an ending, and it's pretty soon. So maybe he decided to do something instead. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't like the jumping ship though at the end. I mean that's not commitment. Come on.
Yeah. I hear you. I understand that. What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, I mean it's disappointing he's leaving. But with shows I've seen on the network in the past, a lot of times some of the producers and creators jump ship, the last couple seasons. Maybe they don't like the direction the show has been going in, or sometimes they don't like the influence the network has over their creative, what they want to do with it. So,
yeah,
I wish him luck, but it's definitely disappointing.
Yeah, it is. And I would be surprised if creative differences were the cause of this leave. It just seems like him and Joel work so well together. Jeff's been on board since episode 2, since the pilot got picked up. Jeff has been on board, and Joel came on early or mid season 1, so they've both been there from the beginning. There's no doubt in my mind that they both know what the conclusion is. They've got the outline all done. They've got a lot of episodes already written. But I do share a lot of Michelle's sentiment in that it's frustrating to see him jump ship when they're so close. If it's a ship, if we're going to continue with the ship analogy, they're pulling into harbor and he's bailing, but if he's got other projects that he feels led to do and the opportunity to do those, I mean, good for him at the same time. So I don't have any doubt that the show will end strong, that it will be the show that they had designed it to be, and that Joel has every ability to do, to do that, to bring the show in, wrap up in a way that the fans will appreciate. But I sure wish that Jeff was there along with them for the final episodes that we're going to be getting. So
it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah,
but maybe he feels he got his influence in before leaving, since, like you said, they would have already had quite a bit of it covered already, and maybe he feels like he's comfortable. Yeah, I
hope so. Well, it'll be interesting to see. He's supposed to be on the panel at Comic-Con, which is about 3 weeks away now. So I don't know. I don't know if he'll be there or not. He's kind of out. Seems like effective immediately. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's not there. In fact, I might be more surprised if he is there. But I could see him showing up as a thank you to the fans, that sort of thing. We've got some other news. I think we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but if not, since we were having a Fringe binge segment today, I wanted to go ahead and mention it. And that is that Fringe Season 4 is releasing on DVD and Blu-ray on September the 4th. So if you're participating in the Rewatch and want to do that, get those as part of the Rewatch, then you'll be able to do that on September the 4th. Now, we're actually going to be in the middle of Season 4 already by the time that releases. And so the way I had planned on getting them, some of them I've got on my DVR, but you can download them in iTunes and stuff like that by the episode. That's probably how I'll be getting mine. And if you want to get those, go over to thefringepodcast.com. Right there on the sidebar, we've got the Fringe DVDs banner. If you click on that, it'll take you over to Amazon, and you can get those, and we'll get a commission for that. We would sure appreciate that. Another thing, this is kind of a little spoiler, but it's something that we typically do, and that is we reveal episode titles as they come along. And the Season 5, Episode 1 title has been revealed. And the title is Transilience Thought Unifier Model 11. Now, I have no idea what that means. I think Clint and Zero Fights might be the only ones that have any idea what those words mean. I looked up the word transilience, and it means something transilient. No kidding. It also says a leap across something or from one thing to another. Now, a leap across one thing to another. Now, that sounds really cool and sounds very fringy. So, a leap across something from one thing to another Thought Unifier Model 11. So it sounds like some sort of device, right? It's got a model number on there. And it's a thought unifier, so something that takes thoughts and unifies them. So I'm wondering if it's some sort of device that you strap onto somebody's melon, and it unifies their thoughts across time and space, maybe into the future, into the present, or something like that. I don't know. Those are kind of my thoughts on it, but it sounds really intriguing for sure.
I think its purpose is to sound intriguing.
Yeah,
to be mysterious and to be like, ooh, what's that going to be about?
Mm-hmm. Well, they've accomplished that. And the final thing I want to talk about in the binge, and then we'll get started on these episodes, is that the Comic-Con panel, I mentioned Comic-Con just a few minutes ago, this year's panel is actually going to be on Sunday, July 15th in Hall H, which is the biggest hall that they have there at San Diego Convention Center. So that's cool. They've upgraded them to the biggest hall there is, and that's going to be on Sunday. No official time has yet been announced, but it has been announced that it will be on Sunday. So we will be there, and we are very much looking forward to seeing the panel and all the cast and crew again at this year's Comic-Con. We'll be bringing you a report from Comic-Con as soon as that wraps up. All right. Are you guys ready to get into these episodes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Root beer float. Butterscotch pudding. Mr. Papaya. Fruit cocktail. Coffee yogurt.
All right, we're going to get things started this week with the Season 2 premiere episode, A New Day in the Old Town. And so the synopsis, once again, coming from our friends over at fringepedia.net, says, Olivia violently returns from her visit with Belle. Peter, Amy, and Charlie race to locate a hostile force bent on eliminating one of the science team. Walter and Astrid return to the lab to isolate a bit of fringe science and prepare for Peter's birthday. Broyles finds his way to Washington, D.C. to face congressional scrutiny and defend the Fringe division. This episode was written by J.J. Abrams and Akiva Goldsman, and this episode was directed by Akiva Goldsman. Dana, you're the newcomer here. I'm going to let you kick it off tonight.
Okay. Well, I guess this episode is the introduction of the shapeshifters. We also meet Agent Jessup. And let's see. The first time we hear the term Selectric 251.
Yes.
Some things I picked up on the episode before Charlie was taken over by the shapeshifter was it was like another example in this episode of how dependable he was for Olivia before they kind of like took his character out of the storyline.
Yeah.
And let's see, what else did I pick up on? The episode took place around Peter's birthday, which he had no recollection of any of the birthdays when Walter seemed to be talking about them. Mm-hmm. And also didn't remember that he was telling Walter he hated custard when Walter was making the custard.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I took notes on that was it was Peter in the room when Olivia woke up and said, to be a better man than your father.
Yeah.
Phrase.
Yeah, that was important, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely one of my favorites we've watched so far in the rewatch. I love this episode. Yeah. We didn't mention the food. Well, we mentioned custard.
Yeah.
But there was red licorice, and what got me was that Walter was eating it while doing an autopsy, and his gloves were like bloody.
I know,
and he's holding the licorice and eating it. I'm just like, how can anyone do that?
Yeah, and he tried to stick his fingers into the custard when Astrid was stirring it, and she swatted his hand away. Yeah. Can you imagine that bloody glove?
And like she's like stirring it like over the body. That was, I remember watching it for the first time, like, back when it was on, and I was just like going, oh. Yeah.
Bishop's Deli and autopsy service.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about this episode is all the X-File homage that they paid. There was the scene of the X-Files playing in the guy's apartment. It's from an episode called Dreamland.
Oh, was it? Wow. Okay.
And yeah, part 1, part 2, I'm not sure, but it was Dreamland. And this is the first episode they filmed in Vancouver.
That's
and
right.
They also mentioned the old X designation during the panel meeting.
That's right, with the
and very parallel
panel.
with the X-Files.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the senators or whoever. The other parallel thing was that the X-Files get shut down at the end of season 1, and the Fringe gets shut down, sort of, almost. And they're questioning, like, their ability to investigate things and, really coming down on them for their alternative, explanations and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah, that was interesting. And I thought it was kind of, I guess it was their way of saying, yes, we are kind of the grandson or whatever, the grandchild of the X-Files. A lot of people through season 1 compared this show a whole lot with X-Files. And a lot of us who are X-Files fans also appreciate Fringe for some of their similarities. And we'll see more of that as season 2 progresses, particularly now that they're in the Pacific Northwest. We'll see some different things. But I took that as kind of a, we're not ashamed to be in the same cloth as the X-Files.
Yeah, that's exactly how I take it. It's very just paying respect.
Yeah.
I got a couple more things I had noticed too.
Okay.
I got another page of it. The first thing was when they were in the pawn shop, when the shapeshifter first goes in the pawn shop, and the guy says to him, "Oh, it's been 6 years since anyone's come."
Yeah.
So we got to kind of get a time frame of at least the last time someone had, like a shapeshifter, had been in there to use the room.
Yeah, I wrote that down too because I didn't realize. I mean, that tells us too that shapeshifters have been not only in the blue verse but have been sending messages back to the red verse for at least 6 years.
Yep. And also, when they were in that senatorial meeting, and Broyles corrects the senators about his rank.
Yeah.
They also say that the Fringe division has been a drain on the government for more than half a century. I don't know if anyone else picked up on that.
I didn't pick up on that, no.
Well, I picked up on it as they were like, and the old X designation, like they're lumping that with Fringe together and saying that has been going on for over half a century or something.
Could be.
If you think about all the old, like, Men in Black stories or all those old experiments, like, even Walter even mentions the MK Ultra Mind experiment, stuff like that has been around for that long.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And this is the episode 2, that we learned that this Blueverse Broyles is a colonel. Now, you may remember back in the end of season 4, Clint and I both went stupid one day, and we were like, well, I don't know. I don't remember this Broyles being called colonel. I remember the Redverse being called colonel, and a few people sent us in and were like, you guys need to put your thinking caps back on. Remember all the way back to season 2. And so this is the episode where we did learn that Blueverse Broyles was, in fact, also a colonel.
Yeah, and I thought the other shocker we should talk about was how Nina kisses Broyles. And I was just like, I remember being taken aback by that, going, what?
Yeah.
What is this history that they have?
Well, yeah, I mean, they seem to have some affection for each other a couple of times in season 1. Like there was a past there of some sort of relationship, whether it was...
They've always hinted towards it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Now they've hinted at it in a more open way, but we've still never learned anything more other than what we've seen right here. Yeah. I had a couple of other notes here. I had forgot that the shapeshifters had to like bust up their face, so I like when I saw that I was like, oh, I forgot all about that. I don't know, it just kind of shocked me a little bit. I still think this is one of the best intros ever when Olivia comes crashing through the windshield, and love that. But Dana, you mentioned that the 6 year, the typewriter thing was 6 years. Another thing that kind of gives us a date on how long these shapeshifters have been around is that the VCR tape that we saw here with Rebecca, and we'll get to meet Rebecca in a few more episodes, but that was from like 20 years ago. I don't know the exact date, but when they were doing their lab experiments, so she was seeing shapeshifters all the way back then. So I estimated it around 20 years ago for that.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to call shenanigans on that because I want to know how she saw them so detailed.
Yeah. Well, I do too. I mean, it was, even then it was weird because she's in the lab, so is she having a vision of something? I mean, she's obviously not physically seeing them; they're not in front of her. So still wasn't real clear on how it was she was seeing them, but her description was spot on.
Yeah, it was like she, I don't know, had an out of body experience and was watching them in an alley somewhere.
I guess, yeah.
I don't know, astral projecting herself.
Yeah. The only other thing I have here is that it really did turn a new chapter in this episode. We saw that the shapeshifters were introduced, as Dana mentioned. We also saw at the very end of the episode when Peter gives the shapeshifting device to Broyles, he says, "Look, no more of this letting it come to us. We're called in after the destruction has already occurred. We're going to start being proactive," and we see that immediately happen in the very next episode. So it's really a new approach that the Fringe team is taking, where they're trying to be proactive rather than reactive. And then the other thing that we got in this was, the story is really turning, even though we got it hinted to us last season, and even Olivia crossed over in the finale, we really turned a corner and starting in this episode where the alternate universe is starting to become a big part of the storyline.
Yeah, and they reveal like a little bit more all the time about how Peter is definitely not from here, and they keep handing little tidbits out here and there about Walter and his memories and stuff.
They sure do.
And then I think Charlie dying was really significant. I was, just as, upset again, going, "Oh, that's right, he gets killed," and then there's this impersonator, and I just feel so bad for Olivia losing him.
Yeah. I was definitely upset about that too. After I felt with Unleashed, it was almost like a Charlie focused plot line, and I felt like they did all this build up for the character to kind of get you to kind of attach yourself to this character that had previously was just kind of almost seemed like an afterthought, and then they kind of bring him to the forefront, and only to get rid of him.
Yeah. It's rude.
I still wonder even now if that was a budgetary thing, and I have no idea, but you remember they moved to Vancouver, as you guys mentioned. This was the first episode filmed there, and that was because of the tax breaks that they had been getting in New York had gone away. They also added in more commercials starting in season 2. Now, they did an experiment in season 1 where they had shorter commercial breaks and even told you how long it would be before the show would come back. That's gone away with here in season 2, and so the budget started to change pretty, I hate to say drastically, but they started looking for ways to save money on the show, and that has been something that has, I think, plagued the show, ever since. I mean, it's just one of those shows that the ratings have gone down, and they've tried various ways to counteract that, but I've always wondered if they got rid of him as a budgetary thing, but I have no idea. But man, I miss him. He's such a good actor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they brought him back in the on the other side in the later the later seasons, so.
Yeah, but he was still never like a full-time regular again after this batch of episodes. So, all right. Anything else on A New Day in the Old Town?
The only thing I have is in quotes Olivia saying something's hidden, and I just wondered if she meant that as we're supposed to think that's the pieces of the machine as we learn throughout the season or something else.
I just took it to mean the cryogenically frozen head, but perhaps it was the machine.
Yeah, that's why I wrote it, because I didn't know if that was necessarily what they were talking about. And I'll talk more about that when we get to. I got more to say about that when we get to Dream Logic. So. Okay,
very good. All right, well, let's let me pull up my other notes over here. So the glyphs for A New Day in the Old Town spelled tower. And the clue to the next episode was a sign that we saw that said Gruno and Dunder, which that was at the crash scene when Olivia comes crashing through the windshield. That's an anagram for underground, which obviously the next episode, Night of Desirable Objects, took place largely underground. Had a burrowing child, I guess, mole rat boy as we call him. The synopsis for this episode is a highway construction worker in rural Pennsylvania goes missing when he is mysteriously drawn into an underground tunnel. In his lab, Walter attempts to simulate travel between alternate universes using frogs. The science team believes that the disappearance in Pennsylvania might not be an isolated event. This was written by Jeff Pinkner and Joel Wyman and directed by Brad Anderson. All right, Michelle, you're up.
Well, my first impression, I remember, was how Gollum-like the character looked like crawling through the cave, and in the silhouette, he looked like Gollum to me from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then my biggest, I mean, the episode, all inclusively wasn't very great, but another big X-File moment, because that house, the rural house in the farm, was actually the same house that they filmed a really famous X-File episode in. And
really
I recognized it like
disturbing
immediately.
X-Files episode.
Yes, a very disturbing. It was banned from the air for a while.
It sure was.
But it was the exact same house, and I was like, oh, that's kind of another little throwback or homage to the X-Files. And they had a couple parallel storylines with the sheriff who kind of gets it in the end. And
yeah, it did. It had a huge X-Files feel, which obviously I love X-Files. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy was very creepy, and I didn't feel like the character, like the villain character, had any real substance to him. You never saw him. He was just more implied, and then he just dies really easily at the end. So I didn't feel like very like this thing was a big threat. And I didn't feel like it fit, it doesn't fit in with the pattern at all or anything else.
Yeah.
But then you have those little things where Olivia is like having these extra senses, and can hear things really well. And she's starting to realize, there's something really different or wrong with me. And, maybe something like that's actually a benefit, and she could use to hone it, and have it work for her. But it's like really freaking her out.
Right.
Oh, and then her almost shooting Peter in the head. Oh, that look that he gave her was just like, you almost killed me, and oh my God.
Yeah, no, she hadn't been half out of her mind at that point. She probably would have hit him right between the eyes.
Oh yeah, yeah. If he didn't, he moved. He moved at that last second, and it was right. It was going to go right between his forehead, of course, because that's where they shoot people in Fringe.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the forehead.
That's right. That's the only way to die.
Unless they're the shapeshifters the first time, in which they just keep on shooting them in the chest.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Michelle, those are a couple of the reasons that I just didn't like this episode. When we first watched it, it was the strange hearing problems that Olivia was having didn't make any sense to me. The mole rat boy wasn't tied to the pattern or any Fringe event. It was just this random event out in rural Pennsylvania. And so it just was like, what's the point of this episode?
Yeah. It doesn't really have much of a point in it. Certainly not something you can go back to and reference as something being important.
Yeah. But I will say that I don't believe this is the worst episode of Fringe anymore. My opinion of this episode has come up, believe it or not. Here's the things I'll say positively about this episode. I still don't think it's the greatest episode out there, and I don't think that anybody thinks it's the best episode out there. But, I always went back to this episode was written by Jeff and Joel. How could I hate an episode so much that Jeff and Joel wrote? What am I missing? And, looking back on it now after we've seen 4 seasons of Fringe, this is an episode that has more value to me now in terms of continuing on the story of a couple of things. What would you do for someone you love? What lengths would you go to?
Yeah.
This father is doing everything he can to try to stop his son from killing all these people. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, what he did he did this to his son, but he didn't do it out of any type of, I don't think, ill motives. I think he was trying to have a son. He wanted a son so badly. He knew that his wife wasn't going to be able to have a son, so he did everything that he could to try to make them a family. And in doing so, he destroyed his family, which obviously has a whole lot of parallels to Walter and Peter and serves as a really nice foreshadowing to what we're going to see happen in their relationship through this season and even season 3. And so I have a lot more appreciation for that as well. And then with the Olivia thing, the hearing thing, that still bugs me a little bit, but I definitely have a better understanding now of what she was experiencing during this time, and the side effects of having gone over to the other universe, and her not understanding her abilities and she doesn't realize that she really does have these amazing things. And I'm not saying she can have superhuman hearing all the time, but she just has no idea what she's capable of, and how her body can react to certain things in a abnormal way than other people would. And so that was kind of a cool thing too. I don't have nearly as much problem with that now, having realized just how special she is and what she's fully capable of. And then the third point I'll make, and then I'll let you guys comment in here, is that remember the way that the last episode ended with Peter going to Broyles and saying, we're going to be proactive. Well, Peter came to Broyles at the beginning of this episode and said, I found this case, let's go work on this. And of course it had nothing to do with anything, because there's a reason Peter doesn't pick the cases. It's not his job to pick the cases, and he's good at other things, but clearly picking cases isn't one of them. And so with that kind of in mind, I kind of give it a pass on that. So those are my thoughts. And so it's no longer my least favorite episode of all time. I'm not sure what is, but this one is not anymore.
Yeah, I never thought it was my least favorable. And this time around when I watched it, I watched it keeping in mind 4 seasons of what we've seen and how I could possibly apply anything we've learned from the 4 seasons into this, and especially where it was Jeff and Joel that wrote it.
Yeah.
You have to know that something that ties into the big picture is in the episode. So there was a few things I wrote down. We got the enhancements to sound, and we talked about her after crossing over and everything she had to deal with. But I try to think of in season 1 was like a buildup of everything that she was going through was essentially activating her, like she was activated in season 4. Mm-hmm. So then when we meet Sam Weiss, which I thought was an important key to this episode,
right?
We meet Sam Weiss. He asks her at the end, have the headaches started yet? And it made me think of when she was getting them headaches all through the first part of season 4, because she was being dosed with cortexiphan and slowly being activated. So I thought, well, maybe the headaches aren't really from crossing over. Maybe it's from, her being activated, so to speak, over the past, few months of what she had been going through. And, we can you can always look back and say maybe that's the case, and we don't really know what's going on in the writer's mind, but it's just something to think about, I guess.
No, I think that's accurate. I mean, particularly with the bell ringing, and the effect that we see those ringing of bells have on her in the future. I mean, I think Belle was definitely trying to activate her. I mean, I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but we are seeing the effects of what he did to her back in the season 1 finale, and so we don't fully understand at this point in the story what's going on. But I think that's part of what he was trying to do.
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder if, like, at the end, if the writers want us to look back and say, "Oh, that's really what they did do." So maybe that episode wasn't really that bad at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely the second watch helps. See it with new goggles.
Yeah.
The monster of the week definitely was almost pointless, but as far as the other things that progressed the storyline, I thought it had some value to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. I think it shows a little bit also of that Nina, maternal sense she has about Olivia. She always seems to try to help her, although I think at this point we still didn't quite trust Nina fully. But she does seem to, try to push Olivia in like a motherly way.
Yeah. Yeah, and at this point, we're still not sure whether we can trust Nina. Obviously, we still have issues with that even today, but much more so, I think, back in season 1 and season 2 than we do nowadays. Yeah. We also had, Michelle, you mentioned in the last episode, the one we just talked about how that father-son storyline is really starting to build. We see it episode after episode, and I know we'll reach a point here, at least we did the first time through, where the audience is going, come on already. Tell Peter the truth. How long are you going to draw this out? Because we had these, every single episode had something. And this one, we had that line, the grave of a boy who's not in his grave, which was a huge foreshadowing of the Peter character. And,
I can't remember where we see the gravestone while they're over the gravestone. Which was that in the last episode?
It was in the season 1 finale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other thoughts on this episode?
No, I'm just very excited to talk about episode 203.
All right. Well, the glyphs in the Night of Desirable Objects were mirror. And I got to say, this episode clue, I think, is pretty weak. And I get all these over at our friends over at Fringe PD, and I don't think they're wrong on it. I just think it's a weak clue. But the train that went by the cornfield had CN on the on several of the cars, which I think is like Canadian National or Canadian something or other. It's an actual, if I understand right, it's an actual train. It's not like they doctored it at all.
Right.
That's why I think it's kind of hokey. So they took something that really exists and turned it into something else. I don't know. But apparently that is also like the abbreviation for cyanide. And so the cyanide was part of the thing that they were injecting themselves with in the next episode. So that's how that all ties in. So the next episode 203, is Fracture. The synopsis says the team investigates a deadly bomb blast that has left no discernible trace of the explosive device. The perplexing circumstances return Walter to the lab to examine human remains in search of the source of the explosion. With the threat of more bombs and the hint of classified projects, Olivia and Peter return to where they first met. This was written by David Wilcox and directed by Brian Spencer. All right, Dana, lay it on us.
All right. Well, this is the episode that since I first saw it, I've always been convinced that ultimately the bad guy is the observers.
Okay.
After watching that, even after the first time I saw this episode. So, but the human bombs. Let's see. A lot of the stuff I had was, aside from them actually looking for Colonel Raymond Gordon, was a lot of the interaction between Sam and Olivia in this episode. And because I just kind of wrote down some of the things that he said to her. Her headaches sparked the battery. He always talks about the headaches separately from the aches and pains, which always makes me think of going back again. The aches and pains are from the injuries of crossing over and going through the windshield.
Yeah.
But the headaches are from actually being activated.
Yeah.
So I always took those as little clues. But the briefcase is the one thing that always stuck out with me. It's at the end when I think September gets the briefcase at the end, and it's the pictures of Walter and Peter. But when Gordon's talking about the enemy and it's showing the observers, that always stuck with me ever since. And I always wondered when they get back to them as the bad guy. When they finally did that in season 4, I was like, okay, now I see where they're going. But I always thought it was kind of like an abandoned storyline until this past season.
Yeah, I had definitely dismissed it until we got the voicemail in this last season. It kind of reminded us all of it, and what a great reminder it was.
Mm.
I'm trying to. I got on the wrong page of my notes here. One of the things that Gordon says here is that I'm trying to pull it up. I thought I had it here, but didn't he say that the thing that was in the cases was going to be what destroyed us all?
Yes. Yep.
And so that was Walter in the briefcase. I don't think it was Walternate. Do you guys?
No, it was definitely Walter because he was with Peter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to find the exact quote here. Yeah, there it is. The very last line of the episode. Because whatever's in those cases is going to destroy us all. Okay, so let me ask you guys. If the war is with the observers, which I think we would agree that ultimately the war, at least moving into season 5, is with the observers, and Walter is what's in the case, Gordon is not an observer, so I'm not sure how to phrase where I'm going at here. Okay, so if there are two sides, let's go at it this way. If there are two sides, you have the observers and you have people, and they're at a war. They're both trying to destroy each other. So if what is going to destroy us all, meaning people, is Walter, does that mean that Walter is going to inadvertently destroy their own team, or does that mean that Gordon is on the side of the observers, or is there something else that I'm not thinking of here? Does that make sense?
I think it's that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dana.
I lost my train of thought, but I think I was going to say that it's more implying, as we learn over season 2 and getting into season 3 with the machine, is maybe they're talking about like them building the machine and Peter getting into it, but and because they always talked about that almost being like a doomsday device,
sure,
leading up to the point when he actually got into it. But I had a thought about that and I totally just lost it. So go ahead. If I get it, I'll go back.
Okay, sounds great. What do you think, Michelle?
Well, what comes to mind is how the fact that Walter was the first person to ever cross universes by pulling Peter out was the trigger that starts the breakdown in the other universe, which ultimately theoretically will destroy both universes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Or it could be, talk about the machine.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that line will end up tying back into something that we see in season 5 that will ultimately cause, destruction.
Yeah, I think if you're going to look at the big picture, the machine was supposed to do what I think the machine was supposed to do was all along they wanted Peter to get the machine to erase himself, so that him and Olivia couldn't have the baby. And so because of that, there was no defense for people from the observers.
Right.
So that ultimately led to the end of regular people.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So in other words, it was destroying it because Peter got in the machine, and because he essentially destroyed himself, he destroyed any chance we had of fighting the observers in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Gordon seems to think that the observers are the enemy, and here we are getting into this battle with the Redverse, and we'll talk about that more, especially I think in the next episode, Momentum Deferred. But I'm kind of the opinion there are two separate battles being waged here. One is with the Redverse that kind of kept the audience preoccupied during this season and season 3. And most of season 4, really, our mind was still in that area, but I think there's a second battle that's being waged that we're kind of oblivious to at this point, and that is this battle with the observers. You guys share that same opinion, or are you thinking something else?
No, that's pretty much the way I thought of it, and almost like a distraction, almost kind of like the red versus blue thing was just like something to distract us while the observers were conjuring their schemes.
Yeah, do you think that it was the observers who were also trying to distract the two universes so that they could carry out their schemes?
That's what I was. That's what I lean towards. Is that that's part of it. Everything that happens up till season 4 going into season 5 was almost like caused by the observers. In other words, they spent 3 seasons of getting September to erase Peter from the timeline.
Yeah. And it makes sense too, as far as it not being necessarily a red herring. If going back to what you said, Dana, as far as the observers trying to get Peter to erase himself from the timeline so that he and Olivia couldn't have Etta, if indeed Etta ends up being the linchpin for the destruction of the observers' plan.
Yeah.
It makes a whole lot of sense that way.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What other thoughts do you guys have on this episode?
There was another bunch of great food items displayed.
Okay.
With apple fritters.
Okay.
Walter being obsessed about these apple fritters.
Yeah.
Walking around the corner and finding them.
That's right. Okay, I'm with you now. I was trying to remember what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Asher had a good line there too, where she said, if you hadn't taken the wrong way, then you got out of your routine or whatever. I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was a really good line.
Yeah, like he would have never discovered those.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
They're seen eating cheeseburgers. Something happens with a watermelon.
Uh-huh.
And then powdered donuts. Remember, Walter was eating the powdered donuts at
He's just licking the powder off of them.
Yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah.
He's just like a little boy with all of his food,
Yeah.
candy and stuff.
I was struck too, and not necessarily in this episode. I don't necessarily remember which episode it was. It was in several episodes though, where he gets so excited about the science. You know, it's a mystery. Every scientific mystery is an opportunity for him to learn something and to try something new. And he loves these dead bodies because they present an opportunity to learn something. And just that childlike enthusiasm he has about these cases. I don't know. It struck me. Maybe they don't show that as often now, or I don't know why, but it just really, I was reminded about how he approached all of this stuff. It was really kind of cool.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, he does have there's the very scientific genius side, and then there's this, kind of fun-loving, more innocent side to him. And it's in a couple episodes, but he does say a line like, "Science should be fun."
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually wrote that down because it was so good.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, it's so fascinating, and I think that's one of the great things about the show is that we get to go along for the ride of all these great, fun things about science. And
yeah.
You could also have the evil geniuses though too.
Yeah.
Create the non-fun stuff.
All right. Anything else on Fracture?
I think that's all I had.
Okay. Let me pull up my notes here. The glyphs in this episode spelled burial, and the clue was I think Olivia had gotten out of a cab or something, and maybe not a cab, but she was walking down the street, and there's like a stone fence there, and on the stone fence was a carving, and it was that omega-looking symbol that we'll see obviously come into play in the next episode, which is Momentum Deferred. The synopsis for this one is: recuperating from her return after meeting William Bell, Olivia consumes a powerful concoction prescribed by Walter to stimulate her memory. The team investigates a series of robbery cases that are tied to the shape-changing visitor. As memories start to return, one of Walter's previous human experiments returns to the lab. This was written by Zach Stintz and Ashley Miller and directed by Joe Chappelle. All right, Michelle, I think you're up.
Okay, so my first impressions with this one were how the shapeshifters, how much like the Terminator they were.
Okay.
The liquid metal guy who like melts, and so their mercury reminded me of him, and how they could just take all those shots and just keep going. And
yeah.
And I thought it was a very obvious.
Yeah, definitely.
Terminator reference. I know this is the one where Astrid says something like Bishop's Deli on the phone because he's like concocting some sort of recipe along with the science. And
yeah, that was right after Olivia had downed that glass of chopped up worms.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Now this is the one with Rebecca, right?
Mm-hmm.
She comes back
yes.
and they go find her. Yeah. So there was definitely something going on between her and Walter. They could tell that they kept referencing to something they had done or some sort of feelings that they had for each other. And I think it's kind of the first time you ever think of Walter in that way at all. Like it's the first time it dawned on me like, oh, Walter, was a man and was with women. And I just kind of was the first time I'd ever even considered that side of him.
Yeah, me too, I think. It was a little uncomfortable. I don't know why. Maybe.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable.
But especially when he followed her back to the house, it was like,
yeah,
come on, like, Walter, are you really gonna do this?
Like thinking about your parents doing that. It's like you just don't want to. You just want to be oblivious. You don't want to know.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was. Just to chime in there, I think it was upsetting. Like if you looked at the looks on Peter's faces, it was upsetting to him because they were basically implying that he cheated on Elizabeth.
Yeah.
With her.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
like there was a lot of upset on Peter's end.
Sure.
And also the fact that maybe Walter took advantage of a young, very stoned woman.
Yes, exactly, right. And I think that's part of what made it uncomfortable too. But she seemed to, she was
she seemed to
asking
reciprocate
for it.
any feelings that were there, perhaps even more. Like maybe she got a crush on him, whereas he didn't really have deep feelings for her, but maybe just took advantage of her.
Yeah.
And, kind of, being a warmer person now, maybe thought differently.
Yeah.
We also see Charlie get shot in the forehead, right in the middle of the forehead again.
Finally, that's the
and
only way to
they
kill
get
him.
at the end.
Mm-hmm. That was so sad.
It was so sad because, Olivia, even though she knows it wasn't him, she still had to pull the trigger on a friend. You just can't help but, feel that was still Charlie.
Yeah, and she really had a hard time dealing with it, and I think that was well played. I mean, psychologically, even if you know it's not your partner, you shot your partner, that would be really
and she's already traumatized. She's already recovering and going through stuff, and now she just realized Charlie is not Charlie. He's already dead, and now there's this Charlie trying to kill her, and she had to, take him out.
Yeah.
It was also, kind of that final, Charlie's really gone, blow.
Yeah.
And I wrote down the first time we see Brandon.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
That's right. I've got that written down too.
Can't read my writing sometimes. So.
Yeah. You're not the only one. Yeah, that was cool to see Brandon. We didn't see him at all season 4, I don't think. Oh no, we saw him as a shapeshifter at the beginning of the series over in the Redverse, and then I think that was the end of it.
Yeah. I only remember him being kind of like the evil Brandon. Yeah. Brent. I don't know if he has an alternate name.
Brandon is what we called him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Brandon it. Yeah, I mean, we also get the knowledge about the hybrids and how there's this first wave coming. It implies that greater story, this war going on, and how, these soldiers are being prepared or whatnot.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I probably should have saved it for this episode. I think I got a little ahead of myself in the last one when we were talking about is there a fight here, a war going on between the Redverse, or is there a war going on between the Observers, or both? Is it a distraction? Is it a whatever? And this episode really helped kind of clear that up. There's definitely a war going on with the Redverse because they're sending over these waves of attack.
Right.
They've had these shapeshifters over here for who knows how many years, So I think there's definitely that war going on between the Redverse and the Blueverse.
Yeah, and it could be, now we know that maybe it was the Observers kind of orchestrating things, keeping the war, over there, and so that Redverse and Blueverse wouldn't notice them as much. Or
and it really makes you wonder, even if somehow, some way, the Observers saw that the death of the Peter in the Blueverse knew that it would lead to Walter crossing universes to take Redverse Peter, and that had to be done so that war could be started, and that the war that was started was somehow, I don't know if it was keep him occupied or for some other reason, but like you said, Dana, that it would ultimately lead to Peter eliminating himself. So they used him for a purpose. Then they found a way to have him eliminate himself, so that Edo would never come. Of course, this didn't happen, but that's your theory that you threw out there. And
retrospect, as having seen it all now, and going back. Yeah. And the only thing I always keep in mind is, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself either, because I know it's the season finale of season 2, but when Bell says he indeed created the shapeshifters for the Redverse, so it makes you wonder: did he really create them for the Redverse, or did he create them for his own selfish plans? And then you wonder did the Redverse really know all along that the Observers are the enemies and we were just in their way?
Yeah. Good question.
And then just also some of the notes I had from this episode. It was the first time we actually see a shapeshifter die, so it's the first time we learn how they can actually be killed.
Yeah.
And then going back to the William Bell, when fake Charlie is talking to one of the other shapeshifters, and he's saying that they brought Olivia over to the other side. And he said, why would Bell bring him over to the other side? And he goes, if we know we're looking for it, it would be a good reason to bring her over. So I thought, why would Bell even know that they were looking for Newton's head? Like, how would he know that?
Yeah.
If he wasn't kind of behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that all just a ploy just to activate Olivia?
That's kind of like the direction my theory goes in, is that it's all kind of like activating Olivia.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I like that. Which would explain too, because I was a little confused. Their intention, their assignment originally. Boy, I can't talk. The original assignment of the shapeshifter when he crashed into Olivia's car was to kill her. And then she survives, but has information. And so then the objective changed from killing her to finding out what the info is and then kill her. And it seemed like they just wanted to know how much she knew. I don't think that she gave them any new knowledge that they didn't already know. So I was confused as to why not just go ahead and kill her. But
if you go back to how she crossed over from the car crash.
Yeah.
So maybe she had to be in that car crash for him to pull her out over to the other side. So maybe saying kill her the order was to kill her so that he would drive hard enough to try to kill her, to give her the force to cross over to the other side.
I think that you're exactly right. That makes a lot of sense.
It does make sense.
And of course, while she was over there, he gave her some tea that were, injected with soul magnets, which we don't even know until, later on the next season that comes back into play.
Yeah. Which also plays into how he's kind of like selfish for his own, his own plans.
Yep. Before we wrap this one up, I wanted to mention that Rebecca, how she sees that glimmer on Peter at the end.
Yeah.
It's not quite the full, shimmer, but it's like, she's like, I see something there. And of course, that's just another clue where we already know. We've already figured it out by now where Peter's from. And I just remember feeling that it just gave me that, it really hooked me. And originally it was like, I just kept wanting to see when they were going to finally, bring it out in the open. And that's just another like little hook, like, oh, yep, we know he is, but nobody's telling him.
I know. Every episode there's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the note I had was that we had two perspectives being thrown out here as far as what Bell and Walter were actually doing, or the effect that they were having on these experiments. Olivia has the opinion that what Bell and Walter did permanently damaged people, but Bell and Rebecca both had the opinion that what they were doing made people special, and she was not at all upset with Walter for what he did to her. She thought that he had made her really special and given her a gift, and that was very similar to what Bell had told Olivia, although Olivia doesn't see it yet. But as she continues to get activated and learn about her abilities and how to control her abilities through the next, seasons 2, 3, and 4, I think that she would now say that what she is something special.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and Rebecca definitely liked having that and was all for it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, anything else on this episode?
No, that's all I got.
All right, Michelle?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, well, actually, one more thing. Just the quote from Olivia. She said, "If Assassin wanted me dead, then I would be."
Yeah, she's probably right about that.
Yeah, that's a little foreshadowing. I don't know if that was meant as foreshadowing or not, but it's certainly interesting. All right. Well, the glyphs in this one spelled memory, and the clue to the next episode in the alleyway there when shapeshifter Charlie finally met his demise, there was a graffiti quote that said, "To sleep, perchance to dream," which is a very nice hint at what we were going to be getting in the next episode, Dream Logic. The synopsis for this one says the team travels to Seattle when workplace violence is brought on by alleged demonic visions. Similar puzzling murders continue after they begin investigating, and clues lead back to a group of patients treated at a local sleep clinic. The bishops find an acceptable place to live, while Olivia finds peace of mind following the loss of Charlie. This episode was written by Josh Singer and directed by Paul Edwards. Dana, I think it's your turn to take it away.
All right. This episode definitely, I think this episode's worse than Night of Desirable Objects, personally.
I do too.
this episode, just no progression in the story whatsoever.
Yeah.
I thought it was a cheesy way for Olivia to get over Dick Charlie's loss by jumbling the words from the business cards.
Yeah.
Really, I didn't even take many notes on this one because I was watching it with such disgust. I really don't like this episode at all.
I took no notes on this one. That's how much I didn't find anything to talk about here.
Just I thought the one good thing about the episode is the crazy eyes.
Yeah, that was cool.
Dreamers having the crazy eyes. That's about it. And also they establish Walter and Peter's new living arrangements.
Yes. Yeah, and I guess one thing I would note is that this story took place in Seattle. We're going to start seeing a little bit more of that now that they're actually shooting in the Pacific Northwest. A few of the stories are now going to start taking place in the Pacific Northwest, and I think that was just so they could accommodate some of the scenery that they were having to deal with there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's definitely a particular climate up here, so you have to work with it, not against it.
Right.
I didn't take a whole lot of notes either, just that this reminded me of another very X-File episode. It was called Folie à Deux, and the guy at the very beginning walks into his office and he starts seeing demon heads on everybody, or no, they're bugs. That's right. He sees everybody as large insects, and it's very similar to the opening scene in this.
Wow, I'm drawing a blank on that. I'm going to have to go find that episode.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It's not, sleep clinic related, but he goes crazy and wants to kill everybody in the office because he sees them all as these really alien-like insects.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it's very close. But other than that, this is the one where Walter says science should be fun and is really excited about the prospects of the science. Saw a little bit of Vancouver scenery. I always like spotting the locations of the scenery. Lionsgate Bridge is when they're on the water and you see that lighted up bridge in the background.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, they're at the end of the episode.
Yeah. And I didn't mind. I wasn't... I kind of liked Olivia searching for those clues and, finding a way to cope and deal. And I thought it was kind of sweet at the end when she figures out what it says. So, but yeah, I actually didn't see that coming. Like before, when he's like having her collect the business cards, I was like, what's going on here? Like maybe I thought she was having such memory problems that she couldn't remember the people she was talking to. Like she needed to have their names written down somewhere.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't hate the episode. I didn't hate the premise at all. I mean, we get this idea of mind control, which we'll see quite a few times repeated throughout the series. We've seen it already, with what Nick Lane did last season, where he was able to control people's minds. And so it definitely had a very fringy feel, a fringe theme to it. We saw the issue that Walter had when he was out of the lab and was really uncomfortable being out of the lab and so far away from his lab. And he said that Seattle felt like St. Clair's to him, and so he had to get back to Boston. There were some different interesting things as far as the character development that we saw there with Walter.
Oh, was this the one where he had that agent and then he drugged him?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's kind of funny, like anybody that walks into Walter's lab is just like fair game.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen to you when you go into that place.
And Peter should know he needs to be more specific. He just told Walter not to experiment on the students there at Harvard.
Yeah. Yeah, and that agent thinks, this is just an old man. I can handle him.
Yeah.
He's no big deal.
Yeah, he has no idea what he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of shows you that Walter still has some, some tricks up his sleeves.
Right.
And can make things happen.
Yeah. The only other thing, also when they're in the hotel and Olivia's wearing a Northwestern t-shirt and Peter's wearing an MIT t-shirt, And she goes, "Oh, the only difference is I probably graduated."
Yes.
I always thought it would have been funny if he goes, "Yeah, no, yeah, but I was a professor at MIT." That would have been because he probably could have conned his way in the past into doing something like that.
Probably could have. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this one?
Well, the food mentioned was the Italian ciabatta bread.
Yes, that Ashley brought over as a housewarming gift.
Yep. And I think the only other one I wrote down was French roast coffee.
Yeah.
Very specific.
And Peter didn't remember a single dream from the ages of 8 to 19.
Oh yes. Right. Thank you for bringing that up. That was pretty significant. And the fact that at the very end of the episode, he does remember a dream. And that was our clue for this. You know, we talked about every episode as something about the Peter Walter relationship and the truth of Peter. Well, that was our big obvious blow over the head type of clue for this episode.
Yeah. Now, was that because like Walter did something to him so he couldn't remember dreams?
I think so.
Like he maybe gave him something when he was having these night terrors so that he like sedate him at night so he couldn't go into REM sleep, or
I don't know. Or
did Peter block it out, himself?
Yeah, I think he definitely did something to him, though.
Yeah, like because he mentions specifically going to Walter about his bad dreams, and Walter saying, teaching him the mantra, and then immediately, it works.
Right.
So it's a little too quick for something to work like that. So Walter maybe gave him something.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. It kind of reminds me of the "There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home" that Dorothy would recite, and then it turns out she was dreaming. But we also had the Project Tin Man, a couple of episodes. Fracture, that was what they were doing, was Project Tin Man. We've seen a few Wizard of Oz references throughout, but
which makes sense.
So. All right, anything else on Dream Logic?
That's all I got.
That's all I got.
Well, the glyphs in this one spelled betray, and I'm just going to read this clue straight up off of Fringepedia because it was really confusing to me. Let me find out what the next episode is here real quick. I don't remember off the top of my head. Momentum, and then Dream Logic. So the next episode is Earthling. That's right. That's the one that John Cassar directed. We had John on the podcast back in season 2. So the glyphs for Earthling, the clue that goes into Earthling, which we'll talk about in our next show. In this episode, Dream Logic, there was a large W in the signage. So it says the large W in the signage is shorthand for a fundamental particle in subatomic particle science. The weak force boson? I'm stupid on this stuff. I don't know. Weak boson, a theoretical product of weak interaction and positron emission, perfectly foreshadows the condition of the ill cosmonaut. So I don't know what any of that means. That's why I had to read it verbatim. So
that's a clue just for the scientists.
Xerophytes is saying it's boson. All right. There you go. All right, so that'll be our clue. That's what we'll look for in the next episode. So let me bring up the schedule for next week. Today's June 23rd. Next week is June the 30th. So we'll be discussing episodes 206 through 210. And we've got 3 folks that are scheduled to join us again next week. Heather and Brandon and Devin. Maybe Xerophytes. If we have someone drop out, Xerophytes is our reserve for next week. So that should be a lot of fun. Those are some good episodes, too, that we'll be talking about. Let me see. Let me go back over to my notes. I want to remind everyone also about Comic-Con, which is coming up. Man, that is only like 3 weeks away. That's going to be the week of July the 11th through the 15th. That Wednesday through Sunday right there. We'll be there through that entire time. So if you're going to be at Comic-Con and want to join us for a meetup or watch us do the podcast or even participate in the podcast, send us an email over at feedback@thefringepodcast.com. and put in there as the subject line Comic-Con Rewatch, and we will get you the information. I haven't sent out the information, so if you've emailed me about that and you haven't got anything from me yet, that's okay, because we're still waiting to see what the final Comic-Con schedule is, so that we can kind of schedule our time, and then I'll email everybody out on that. So go ahead and email me over at feedback@thefringepodcast.com, and I will get you on the list to contact once we do have that figured out. I think we've got like 2 or 3 spots left on the schedule for the rewatch, like we did tonight. So if you are wanting to participate, get your information sent over to me this week, because we are going to run out of spots for the rest of the series. And you can send that over to feedback@thefringepodcast.com with the subject line Summer Rewatch, and I will get you the information you need to get on the schedule. All right. I want to say thanks to Michelle and Dana. It was great having you guys on. You both brought your A game this week, and I think we've got some good stuff for the folks to listen to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Look forward to having both you guys on again at some point during the summer. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you guys have your cheesy, nerdy, geeky sign-off ready. So if you don't, get that ready while I give the rest of our contact information. I gave our email address already. If you want to give us a call on the Fringe phone, you can do that at 304-837-2278. You can also follow us on Twitter at Fringe Observers, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Golden Spiral Media. All right, I think that is all. So until next time, stay Fringe-tastic.
Yeah, I got one finally, and it's going to be The Truth Is Out There.
Nice.
I was just going to say, in honor of Dream Logic, dream big and sweet dreams, everybody.
Nice. Very good. The Fringe Podcast and Golden Spiral Media are not associated with Bad Robot Productions, Warner Brothers, or Fox. Golden Spiral Media's use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, and for educational purposes, as provided within United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use. Copyright 2012, Golden Spiral Media.